It started with a podium on my front lawn. No, really, an actual wooden podium planted right between my driveway and mailbox like a confused Eagle Scout ceremony was about to happen. There was a mic stand too, complete with a little HOA flag zip-tied to the pole, flapping in the breeze like it had conquered something. And standing behind it was Karen Whitmore, clipboard in hand, voice amplified and polished like she was auditioning for her own TED Talk. I was still peeling off my riding gloves when I heard her say the words, "And if we want safer neighborhoods, we must take swift action against unregulated recreational disturbances." Translation? My family. Specifically, our Sunday rides on the ATVs through the wooded ridge behind our house, the same rides I've taken with my kids for years. I stood there, muddy boots on my lawn, helmet under one arm, while Karen gave her little press conference to a circle of smug, half-interested neighbors sipping iced lattes like this was some kind of HOA Netflix special. Elise stepped out behind me, brow furrowed, phone already recording. Jalen stood frozen beside our trailer, one boot still in his hand. Tiana, bless her, whispered, "Is this like illegal or just peak Karen?" Karen didn't flinch when she saw me. She smiled, not the warm, neighborly kind. No, this was the smile you see before a chess piece gets taken. And then came the final blow. Effective immediately, the Cedar Pines HOA will be submitting a motion to rezone the buffer lots, including the Holt residence, for environmental oversight under temporary emergency designation. I laughed, out loud, because that's what you do when someone tells you your private land, carefully bought outside of HOA jurisdiction, is suddenly theirs, by emergency declaration. The neighbors clapped. One of them even shouted, "About time." That's when I knew this wasn't about noise. This was war. Let me back up. My name's Marcus Holt. I'm 45 years old, retired early, not because I had to, but because I could. I built a logistics company from the ground up, sold it for more zeros than I care to admit, and decided to do the one thing I'd spent 20 years too busy to enjoy, live. So I bought land. 5 acres outside a little town in northern Georgia. No HOA, no neighbors breathing down my neck, no covenant rules about mailbox height or acceptable mulch color. Just trees, hills, dirt trails, and enough silence to hear my own kids laughing. And man, that's really what this place was about for me, them. Jalen's 15 now, and he's already better on a quad than I ever was. Built like a string bean with too much energy, a sharp wit, and no fear of flying over small creeks. Tiana's 11, our little documentarian, always with a GoPro strapped to her chest and commentary that's way too sarcastic for her age. We ride together every weekend, up the ridge, through the pines, across a rock pass we named Mom's Panic Point, because Elise refuses to watch that part anymore. Our land has a trailhead I carved myself with a rented backhoe and too much pride. It runs behind the house, winds through the woods, and opens into this little hidden meadow that turns golden in the fall. That place? That meadow? That's where we buried my old shepherd, Duke. That's where Jalen landed his first jump. That's where Tiana asked me if girls can be motocross racers too, and I said, hell yes, they can. It's ours, every inch of it. So when Karen decided to plant her podium there like she was claiming it for queen and country, she didn't just mess with my Sunday, she messed with the reason I left everything else behind. And that was her first mistake. It didn't take long for the first shot to be fired. And no, I don't mean metaphorically, I mean an actual citation notice duct taped to our trash bin like it was a wanted poster in the Wild West. Notice of non-compliant activity, it read in all caps with that distinct HOA flair for drama. Beneath it, a grainy photo of my ATV parked in our backyard, like it was some kind of criminal evidence. Now, to be clear, our backyard is 5 acres of fenced-in, tree-lined privacy. There are deer who stroll past my grill like they own the place. But according to the letter, my unauthorized recreational vehicle storage was a violation of Section 12, Visual Aesthetic Harmony. Visual, aesthetic, harmony. I stared at it for a good minute before Elise leaned over my shoulder and said, "So, they're mad your ATV doesn't match the foliage?" I tried to laugh it off. After all, the HOA had no actual jurisdiction here. Our property was explicitly outside the subdivision. I checked that 10 times before signing the deed. And once more, after this nonsense arrived, just to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. Then came the second letter, this time slid under our door in a manila envelope, hand-delivered. No stamp, no postmark, just a sticky note on the front that said, "Thought you might have missed the first one." Inside was a full packet. Photos of us riding through the woods, screenshots of my daughter's YouTube vlog, and a typed community disturbance report signed by Karen Whitmore herself. Apparently, a few residents of Cedar Pines felt threatened by the presence of high-speed vehicles near their property lines, and were concerned about the long-term environmental impact of reckless recreational use. Now keep in mind, we weren't anywhere near their homes. The closest Cedar Pines lot is over 400 yards from our northern tree line. You'd have to squint through binoculars from their cul-de-sac to even guess someone was out there riding. But that wasn't the point. The point was control. Karen wanted to establish a paper trail, a record of non-compliance, even if it was all imaginary. That week, Jalen got pulled aside at school. His science teacher gently suggested that his family consider less invasive hobbies. Elise had a local mom tell her at the grocery store it must be hard keeping all that machinery clean. My husband would never let our kids around those things. And then came the kicker. Tiana came home from school in tears. They'd been doing a project on green communities, and when she proudly shared a video of our last trail ride, a few of the kids giggled. One girl raised her hand and asked, "Isn't your dad the guy destroying the forest?" That night, I sat on our porch while the kids were asleep. Elise brought out 2 whiskeys without saying a word. She didn't have to. We both knew exactly what was happening. Karen wasn't trying to reason with us. She was trying to build a case, to paint us as the noisy outsiders, the reckless family, the problem that needed solving. One complaint at a time. And somewhere behind that fake smile and clipboard, she was already planning her next move. It escalated faster than I thought possible. One morning, we woke up to find bright orange stakes driven into the ground along the back edge of our property line, perfectly spaced with little plastic ribbons fluttering like some kind of festive condemnation. I thought it was a surveyor at first, maybe the county doing maintenance on the easement trail. Then I found the metal sign hammered into the ground near the tree line where Jalen keeps his jump ramp. It read, "Protected Environmental Buffer Zone. No motorized vehicles, no unauthorized entry. Temporary oversight. Cedar Pines, HOA." I stared at it for a full minute, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Later that day, a neighbor I barely knew, Greg something, one of Karen's little HOA foot soldiers, walked over with a printed flyer. He didn't make eye contact, just handed it to me like it was a subpoena and said, "Figured you'd want to see this." The flyer was titled, "Preserving Our Peace, a community initiative for Cedar Pines and surrounding properties." It was a call to action, a public meeting. Karen was hosting it on the clubhouse lawn that Saturday with speakers from an urban conservation partnership and concerned parents talking about external disturbances. And right there, dead center, was an aerial drone photo of our land, with red highlights drawn over our trails and the caption, "Known noise-polluting vehicle routes targeted for neutralization." Neutralization, like we were a freaking military threat. I didn't even know they had a drone. I guess when you're HOA president and running for public office, privacy becomes optional. That Saturday, I didn't go to the meeting. Didn't need to. They brought it to us. Elise was out running errands. I was working on the garage door motor when Tiana ran in, out of breath, shouting, "Dad, they're in the meadow." I thought she meant the deer again. Nope. I walked around the back of the house and saw half a dozen people, HOA volunteers in matching shirts, standing in our field with clipboards and cameras. One of them was pacing the perimeter with a wheel measure. Another was placing little colored flags near the trail markers. I shouted, loudly. The woman in front turned, smiled, and said, "Oh, we're just conducting a visual impact survey. Should only take an hour or so." "You're trespassing." Karen appeared from behind a tree as if on cue, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and that damn laminated badge she never took off. She smiled like I'd just complimented her casserole. "We're within our right to document ecological impact for public review. These trails intersect with the community buffer. They're on my property." She didn't blink. For now? That night, Elise and I sat on the porch again. No whiskey this time, just silence and the buzz of summer gnats. We'd put everything into this place, not for status, not to show off, just to breathe, to give our kids room to be wild and free before the world told them not to be. And now we were watching that peace get poisoned, one bureaucratic word at a time. Then came the letter. This one was different. Certified mail, sealed envelope, no sarcasm, no hand delivery. Just cold legal language from the Cedar Pines HOA Legal Oversight Committee. Yes, apparently that's a thing. Due to ongoing community complaints, environmental disruption, and unlicensed trail development, your property is now subject to temporary environmental management consideration under Zoning Clause 6.3b, pending further municipal review. I read it 3 times. It meant nothing. Legally, it wasn't enforceable. Our property wasn't in their jurisdiction. Not by law, not by deed. But that wasn't the point. The point was optics. Karen was building a campaign, and we were the poster family for chaos. 2 days later, Elise lost her first major sponsor on the blog. Apparently, a concerned parent forwarded the drone photo with a message about child endangerment on unregulated terrain, The company called it a reputational risk and backed out. Tiana deleted 3 videos from her channel after a kid at school told her she was basically destroying the planet for views. And Jalen? He stopped riding. He didn't say why, just walked into the garage after school, set his helmet down on the workbench, and never picked it up again. That crushed me. Not because of the politics, not because of the smear campaign, but because a 15-year-old kid who had nothing to be ashamed of was starting to feel like the villain in his own life. Karen had done what she set out to do. She'd made us question whether we still belonged on land we owned. She hadn't touched a single legal boundary, but she had poisoned the air around it. And somewhere, behind her clipboard and campaign posters, she was smiling. Because in her mind, we were already halfway gone. I'm not a man who goes looking for fights. I built my entire career on negotiation, contracts, logistics, international shipping routes. I once mediated a 6-company merger without a single lawsuit. I don't raise my voice unless the roof's on fire, and I sure as hell don't go to war with clipboard-wielding retirees unless I've tried every peaceful option first. So I tried. God help me, I tried. First, I filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board, complete with parcel maps, our deed, and a highlighted section that clearly stated, this property is not and has never been part of Cedar Pines HOA or any related subdivision. I got a reply 7 days later from someone named Doug, because of course it was Doug, with a PDF attachment and this gem of a sentence. While your property is not technically under HOA jurisdiction, temporary environmental designations can be suggested by surrounding communities if a compelling case is made. Suggested. As in HOA, Karen could suggest her way into regulating private land. Elise read it over my shoulder and muttered, "Did he just copy-paste from the Cover Your Ass handbook?" Pretty much. Next, I reached out to the school board. I asked for a meeting with the principal, not to make trouble, just to talk. Tiana deserved to learn in a space where she wasn't being made to feel like her family was one engine rev away from eco-terrorism. The principal was polite, sympathetic even. She leaned forward across her desk and said things like, "We value all family backgrounds, and of course outdoor recreation has its place." Then she pulled out a folder with printed screenshots, comments from neighborhood social media posts, clips from Tiana's YouTube videos, and a handwritten note from another parent claiming our kids were modeling irresponsible behavior. "I'm not accusing," she said, smiling like a hostage, "but you understand the perception we're dealing with?" Right. Perception. Karen's favorite weapon. Then I went to the Cedar Pines HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but I wasn't trespassing either. The meeting was held at the public library. I walked in wearing jeans, a clean polo, and every ounce of corporate charm I'd honed over 20 years. Didn't even raise my voice when Karen looked up from the podium and said, "Oh, Marcus, didn't expect to see you here." "I'm here for the public comments," I said. "That's still allowed?" She didn't answer, just gave that politician's nod, the kind that looks respectful but means we've already made up our minds. I waited my turn, then stood before the microphone and laid it all out. Our land is private, our activities are legal, our kids are being harassed at school because of misinformation spread by HOA members. And if this continues, we'll be forced to take legal action, not out of aggression, but out of necessity. I ended with, "You don't have to like how we live, but you don't get to rewrite the map just because you don't like what's on the other side." Polite applause from the back, mostly older folks. One woman mouthed, "Thank you," as I sat down. Karen smiled her usual smile and said, "We appreciate your passion, Mr. Holt, and rest assured we're always looking for ways to bring our greater community into alignment." Alignment. What a word. That night, Elise and I sat on the back porch again. She stared at the trail beyond our fence, the one that led into the ridge we'd carved with our own hands, and asked, "Do you think we made a mistake moving here?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know. Not because we'd done anything wrong, but because we were surrounded by a system that didn't care whether we were right. And somehow, she was winning. Not with facts, not with authority, but with relentless, suffocating pressure, drip by drip, inch by inch, wearing us down not by force, but by exhaustion. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about land. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't even about the damn ATVS. Karen was building a campaign, a platform, a narrative, and we were her villains. She didn't want us to stop riding. She wanted a story. One she could tell the town, the HOA, the county board, the voters. A story where she saved a quiet neighborhood from the chaotic family with motors and money. And unless I changed the script, she was going to win. Peace wasn't an option anymore, it was just another word for surrender. I wasn't looking for dirt. Honestly, I just wanted to know who the hell gave Karen the idea that she could declare my property a conservation project like she was the mayor of Yellowstone, so I started poking around public records. It was late, kids were asleep, Elise was editing a blog post, and I went down the digital rabbit hole of county zoning committee minutes, environmental filings, and permit requests. And that's when I found it. Item 14B, May 3rd, Zoning Committee, Meeting Minutes. Proposal submitted by candidate Karen Whitmore to reclassify outer parcels along the Pine Ridge Corridor as part of the Green Futures Initiative. Includes motion to designate critical conservation pathways for future development of the Whitmore Nature and Learning Center, pending funding approval after municipal election. I read it 3 times, then once more out loud. Whitmore, Nature and Learning, Center. My land wasn't just some temporary PR stunt for Karen's campaign. It was the keystone piece of her entire political platform. I kept digging, heart pounding in that slow, angry way that feels colder than rage. Turns out Karen's campaign slogan, "Protect the Pines, Preserve the Future," was more than just a Pinterest-worthy catchphrase. It was tied to a nonprofit application she filed 6 months ago, listing herself as executive director of a future environmental education facility on privately held land, specifically on a patch of undeveloped wooded acreage north of Cedar Pines. Our ridge. There were mock-ups, renderings, a goddamn donor packet. I opened the PDF and there it was, a digital illustration of a sleek nature center with glass walls and kids playing in a sculpture garden, right where Tiana took her birthday trail ride last year. And beneath it, projected construction contingent upon acquisition of surrounding land through community-led easement initiatives or negotiated purchases. Negotiated purchases. Orient easement initiatives. In other words, convince the county we're an environmental nuisance, use political clout to push a temporary zoning order, and once the land is protected, force a buyout under some feel-good conservation clause. That's why she'd been so careful not to push too hard with legal threats. She didn't want to fight. She wanted leverage, a quiet surrender, a peaceful exit, something she could sell to donors as community cooperation. Elise walked into my office around 1 a.m., found me with a half-drunk cup of coffee and a dozen tabs open, face lit by cold blue light. I turned the monitor toward her and said, "She's trying to build a nature center on our land. She's using her campaign to set it up." Elise leaned in, scrolled once, then again. She didn't speak for a while. Finally, she whispered, "That's why she's been smiling the whole time." She wasn't reacting to us. She was performing for someone else. The HOA just a stage. The flyers, just props. The meetings, the citations, the school complaints, all part of a script she'd written months ago. And in that moment, everything snapped into place. Karen wasn't trying to drive us out because she didn't like noise. She was trying to flip a campaign promise into real estate, using public sympathy, environmental buzzwords, and a fake community crisis to mask the fact that she was attempting to steal land she could never afford and never deserved. My land, my kids' trails, our story, turned into her stepping stone. I looked at Elise, and for the first time in weeks I smiled. Not because I felt better, but because now I knew what we were really fighting. And more importantly, I knew how to end it. I've always believed in fighting with facts before fists. That's what made me good at my job. Logistics is about seeing the pattern before the rest of the room realizes there is a pattern. And Karen? She was predictable, a smart manipulator, sure. But she couldn't resist leaving breadcrumbs, little proof-of-concept moves that made her feel clever and in control. She never expected someone would actually follow the trail. So once I knew the Nature Center wasn't a theory, but a full-blown plan, I did what I do best. I got organized. Step 1, assemble the arsenal. Elise and I pulled every document we had, our property deed, county GIS maps, soil assessments, even the drone footage from Karen's propaganda campaign. Funny how her violation of our airspace became our advantage. We took screenshots of the donor packet, the campaign filings, and public zoning minutes. We color-coded everything. Elise even labeled one folder Karen's Delusions. It made her laugh. We needed that. Step 2, call in the pros. Now, I could have used my money to hire some fire-breathing attorney from Atlanta and crush the HOA with a wall of paper and a 7-figure suit. But that wasn't the move. Too flashy. Too aggressive. No, I needed someone quietly dangerous. A scalpel, not a sledgehammer. I called up an old colleague from my startup days, Samir, who now worked for a boutique real estate law firm that specialized in land encroachment and zoning abuse. His voice lit up when I told him what was going on. "You're telling me," he said, "an HOA president running for office tried to rezone your private land so she could build a park with your meadow as her personal ribbon-cutting backdrop?" "Exactly." There was a pause, then he said, "Oh, We're gonna have fun with this. Step 3. Leak the story, but smartly. Karen built her campaign on image, order, protection, community values. So the worst thing that could happen to her wasn't a lawsuit. It was a crack in her narrative. I reached out to someone who'd once interviewed Elise for her parenting blog, local lifestyle journalist named Jody Gray. She had a quiet fire behind her writing, and more importantly, she hated political phonies. When I told her the story, off record at first, her eyes widened. I showed her the campaign documents, the land filings, and most damningly, the illustrated donor packet featuring our family's property dressed up like a theme park. She asked one question: can I publish the kids' trail names? Only if you spell Panic Point with capital letters. Step 4. Flip the school. Elise drafted a formal complaint to the school board, backed by digital harassment logs, anonymous comments from HOA Facebook pages, and examples of classroom bias. She didn't threaten a lawsuit, she just made it clear: if our kids are being used as pawns in a community member's political campaign, we'll have to consider relocation, but we'll make sure to explain why and to whom. 2 days later, we got a call, apologies, misunderstandings. Tiana's science teacher offered her extra credit for a video project on sustainable off-road recreation. Amazing how quickly people find their spine when they realize they might be in a headline. And finally, the paper trap. Samir helped us draft a cease and desist order, not just for the HOA's fake zoning notices, but specifically targeting Karen's nonprofit filings. See, when you apply for tax-deductible nonprofit status, you have to declare your intent clearly, and if that intent includes private land you don't own, that's called fraudulent misrepresentation. Very illegal, very juicy. We compiled the whole package: timeline, photos, filings, campaign materials, and attached it to an official inquiry filed with the state ethics board overseeing municipal elections. Because Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor anymore, she was a public official in waiting, misusing her platform to pressure a private citizen into forfeiting their land. And the moment we filed that report, she became our pawn. The final piece? I emailed Karen directly. Just 2 lines. Karen, we know about the center. You should have left the trail alone. Then I attached a single photo, her glossy brochure overlaid with a bold red stamp that read, "Not your land. Let the countdown begin." Karen didn't respond to my email. No denial, no threats, not even a passive-aggressive emoji. Just silence. And in Karen's world, silence is panic. She'd spent months building a narrative: community savior, eco-warrior, defender of peaceful living. And now, all it took was one document dump and a strategically placed journalist to start pulling at the seams. And I hadn't even begun the real fun yet. It started with the story. Jody Gray's exposé dropped on a Thursday morning, and by noon, it had already spread beyond our little town. The headline was clean, devastating, and absolutely un-Karen. Campaign of Control: How one HOA president tried to build her nature center on a family's backyard. She didn't pull punches. Jody broke it down like a Netflix doc. Detailed timeline of Karen's efforts to rezone private land. Photos of our kids' trails and how they ended up in campaign materials without consent. Pull quotes from the campaign packet, including the phrase "unregulated family property targeted for environmental recapture." And my favorite, drone stills that Karen's own people shot, now repurposed as evidence of privacy violations. By the end of the piece, she'd painted Karen not as a hero, but as a power-hungry opportunist with a taste for land grabs and political theater. The comment section lit up like a bonfire. Is this even legal? She used children in a smear campaign? I'm in a different HOA and this sounds exactly like ours. And then came the big one. Wow, my son goes to school with the Holt kids. This explains a lot. Next came the school. With Elise's complaint hanging over their heads and Jody's story now public, the school board jumped into self-preservation mode. We received a very formal, very timid apology from the principal, who assured us that appropriate boundaries have now been reinforced with staff. Tiana was invited to resubmit her trail video for the Community Innovation Showcase. The theme? Sustainable local culture. Yeah, they gave her a ribbon. Meanwhile, Samir was just getting warmed up. He filed a motion to invalidate the HOA's zoning outreach program, citing fraudulent representation and misapplication of jurisdiction. The petition triggered a mandatory county review, which meant the planning board had to freeze all initiatives tied to Karen's proposals. We also delivered cease and desist letters to the HOA's legal committee, forcing them to retract their environmental notices and signage or face a lawsuit. Within a week, the orange stakes were gone. The protected zone sign? Ripped out and dumped unceremoniously at the edge of our trail. I kept it. It's hanging in my garage now. right above Jalen's workbench. But the best was yet to come. Karen had an open Q&A scheduled at a town hall event the following weekend, part of her final campaign push before the election. I showed up early, not to speak, just to watch. The room was packed, cameras, reporters, a few HOA loyalists in matching polos. Karen took the mic with her usual glossy confidence, delivering her script about green spaces, family values, healing divisions, blah blah blah. Then came the questions. First a softball, what inspired your run? Then a curveball. Have any of your proposals involved land not owned by the HOA? She blinked, just once, but it was enough. And then Jody stood up, camera in hand, notebook in the other. She asked, do you believe it's ethical to campaign on plans involving privately owned property without the owner's consent and use their children's public videos to justify your case? You could feel the shift. Karen's jaw twitched. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, wait, what did she say? Karen answered eventually. Something about miscommunication and how she thought the land was technically adjacent, and how community-led conservation sometimes required bold vision. But the damage was done, because in the back of the room I stood up. Not angry, not dramatic, just tall, quiet, and visible. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly who I was, and that I was still here, still standing, still owning every inch of land Karen had tried to claim as her own. By the time the town hall ended, the whispers had turned to open conversation. The comments online weren't just angry anymore, they were embarrassed. Karen had sold them an image, and now that mask had slipped off in real time. That night, her campaign website quietly went offline. By morning, the cedarpinesforward.org page redirected to a 404 error. And Karen? She didn't show up to the next HOA meeting, but I did. The HOA clubhouse had never seen that many people. Usually, it was the same 10 retirees shuffling in for community harmony meetings where they debated things like acceptable wind chime volume or the dangers of lawn flamingos. But this time, it was packed. Standing room only. Cameras rolling. A guy from the local paper in the back. A woman live streaming with her phone held suspiciously steady like this wasn't her first HOA rodeo. Someone even brought popcorn. And at the front, where Karen usually held court with her clipboard like it was the Constitution, an empty chair. Technically, this was supposed to be Karen's monthly community roundtable, the same meeting where she'd planned to unveil her final campaign announcement before the municipal election. The one where she'd intended to roll out Phase 2 of the Green Futures Initiative. Where she'd planned to cement her legacy, where she'd expected to win. Instead, the board secretary stood awkwardly at the podium, flipping through a stack of unclaimed talking points and murmuring, Ms. Whitmore regrets she couldn't be here due to unforeseen circumstances. Unforeseen? Sure. Like a 3-page front feature in the Sunday edition titled, Candidate Accused of Land Grabbed Through HOA, Residents Demand Answers. With a giant full-color aerial photo of our property as the centerpiece, complete with Karen's donor packet overlay in the corner. The article had dropped 2 days before the meeting. It was everywhere, online, in print. Elise had to stop reading the comments because she couldn't decide if they were hilarious or terrifying. Some of my favorites. Karen Whitmore, making nature yours, even when it's not. How do you conserve land you don't own, Karen? This is the worst rebranding of Manifest Destiny I've ever seen. So instead of unveiling her next big move, the HOA meeting became a tribunal. People asked real questions, angry ones. Why were we told that land was public access when it's clearly not? Did Karen spend HOA funds on campaign flyers featuring someone else's property? Are we liable for any of this? The HOA board members, most of whom had gone along with Karen for years because she brought snacks and ran things with a scary efficiency, just sat there blinking like someone had unplugged the power grid. And then, like any good courtroom drama, came the final act. Samir, my lawyer, stood up from the back and introduced himself. I represent Marcus Holt, he said, voice calm, suit sharp, and I'm here to serve notice that any continued false claims of authority over his property, any further attempts to leverage it for political or financial gain, and any unauthorized entry by HOA-affiliated individuals will result in immediate litigation. He passed a copy of the cease and desist letter to the board president, and then, because Samir is a professional with a flair for timing, he added, "Oh, and just for clarity, there are now 4 ethics complaints pending against Ms. Whitmore, one of which includes fraudulent use of nonprofit documentation involving minors." You could have heard a squirrel fart on the roof. 2 days later, Karen officially withdrew from the election. Her campaign issued a vague statement about shifting priorities and the importance of personal reflection. The HOA sent out a mass email clarifying that no individual member ever acted on behalf of the board without full transparency and consensus, which was a polite way of saying, please don't sue us too. By week's end, the orange stakes were gone, the signs were gone. The drone? Confiscated as evidence in one of the ethics investigations. Jalen's helmet returned to the garage hook. Tiana posted her next video, a quiet ride through the Golden Meadow, edited with soft music and the caption, "We're still here." And Karen? She moved. Some say she went to stay with her sister in Arizona. Others say she's just hiding out until things blow over. I don't really care. She came at us with a plan, a script, a campaign. But she forgot the one rule that matters in real life. You don't build your platform on someone else's land, especially not mine. It's quieter now. Not in the sense of less engine noise. We still ride most weekends, especially when the weather's good and the trails are dry. But it's the other kind of quiet. The kind that settles over a place when nobody's watching you anymore. When you don't have to glance over your shoulder every time a car slows down near your fence line. When your kids stop asking, "Did we do something wrong?" It's peace, hard-won, slightly dented, but real. The land is back to being just land again. The signs are gone. The tension is gone. The meadow, our meadow, is blooming again with early fall grass, that kind of wild golden hue that only shows up when the sun hits it just right. Elise keeps a photo of it in her office now, the one Tiana took on her GoPro, the shot where Jalen is midair, helmet tilted with the sunset flaring behind him like something out of a commercial. Sometimes I still find pieces of Karen's old stakes out by the trailhead, little shards of orange plastic buried under leaves. I don't throw them away. I keep them in a mason jar on a shelf in the garage, right next to the rusted wrench I used to build the first trail marker. It's petty, maybe, but it reminds me of the line we held and the one they never crossed again. The HOA sends out newsletters still, mostly about dog poop and sidewalk cracks. Karen's name hasn't appeared in a single one since the election. I doubt it ever will again. Elise went back to posting regularly. Her followers actually doubled after the story went viral. Funny thing, turns out people love a mom who stands her ground and knows how to file an ethics complaint. Go figure. And the kids? They're good. Tiana's newest video series is called Ridge Kids. Jalen's rebuilding an old dirt bike with me in the evenings. He's quieter now, but not in a broken way, more focused. I asked him once if he missed the way things were before all this started. He just shrugged and said, "Not really. It's cooler now that we earned it." As for me, I sit on the porch most mornings with a mug of strong coffee and my boots up on the railing. The sun comes up over the ridge like it always has. Sometimes I hear the faint sound of tires on dirt echoing through the trees, and every once in a while a car will slow down in front of our driveway, but they don't stop. Not anymore. Because this land is marked in more than just paper now. It's marked in memory, in sweat, in miles, in defiance, and if anyone ever forgets that, well, we've got trail maps, a lawyer on speed dial, and a jar full of plastic reminders. Let them try. We'll still be here, riding.